Growing up, a lot of us are made to feel like somehow we're just doing life wrong. There's this constant pressure to adapt and catch up. And that feeling can be especially true if you're neurodivergent or grew up in an environment where being ourselves just wasn't safe. As a result, many of us had to mask or hide aspects of ourselves, often leaving us feeling disconnected from ourselves and the world around us. Hi, thanks for being here. If this is your first time meeting me, my name's Aliza. I'm a trauma informed certified ADHD life coach, and I was diagnosed with ADHD later in life. And that experience has helped inspire me to create this space, a shame free place where I'm hoping we can explore how ADHD, trauma, relationships, attachment patterns, and our nervous systems shape the way we experience ourselves and the world around us. Through the lens of coaching and the use of symbology, such as tarot and oracle cards, as a reflective tool, we'll explore these topics more deeply. And in the process, my hope is that we can create a space where we can support each other in building greater self trust, acceptance, and connection while we work on figuring out what's underneath all those expectations and masks that we had to take on just to fit in a world that didn't necessarily have us in mind when it was created for us. Um, Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about masking, and I'd like to invite you to start on a little journey with me, one that starts before we learn to take on these roles and live up to the expectations of others. So, if you're open to coming along, just feel free to pull up a chair, maybe get a warm beverage, and do whatever you need to get comfortable. So, let me introduce you to the main character of this journey. And it's actually a card from the tarot. It's the Fool card here. And if you're not familiar with the Rider Waite tarot, it is the first card in the deck. It's the first of 22 cards known as the Major Arcana. And the major arcana can be seen as kind of like a symbolic map of the human experience, representing our experiences as we move through life, relationships, struggles, transformation, growth, and everything in between. So I'm starting with the Fool card here because it does represent a time early in life when hopefully if we had a family that was safe enough where we could feel open-hearted and joyful and curious and carefree, a time when, before expectations were put on us and we'd just be human beings, who we are, not having to fit to a mold. But of course, as we get older, you know, we more expectations are naturally put on us, and we are have to look out inside of ourselves to see what is going on around us to figure out how to fit in and belong. And so, if we are neurodivergent, or if we don't have a family that's safe to, be ourselves for whatever reason, um, we have to adapt very quickly to figure out how to fit in, belong, be loved, be safe. So we'll return to this card in a little later down the road here. But I thought I would just kind of mention a little bit about my story because I think it might resonate with some of you. So for decades, I really had to white knuckle my way through school, through work, um, managing relationships and the household, things like that. Everything felt harder for me than it seemed to be for other people around me. And because I did experience a lot of childhood trauma growing up, and we didn't have a lot of resources or support, I kind of assumed that a lot of the challenges I was having in my life was related to early childhood trauma. And I did fear like that I just wasn't maybe smart enough. I wasn't capable enough to be able to be successful the way I was hoping to in my life. So it was a very frustrating time. And when I hit my 20s, I did start therapy, which was tremendously helpful in a lot of ways. We did process early childhood experiences and trauma, and that helped me to kind of learn to manage better my emotions and understand my behaviors and thoughts and these things. But there was still, a big piece missing. While therapy did help me kind of become aware of what my subconscious was, and that was really actually very insightful for me. I think that I've always wanted to better understand how our subconscious does impact our conscious lives, and I kind of carried that interest along with me, but knew that there was something more I needed to understand to figure out why I just couldn't. Um, get things done. I was struggling so much in many areas of my life with the executive functioning piece, like as far as being able to prioritize and plan and strategize, and my memory was really struggling. I struggled to, have a clear enough mind without all these thoughts rumbling around all the time, and then to be able to hold on to a thought and keep that in my memory while I then created new thoughts to create new strategies for myself, made it so hard just to even like plan a paper, right? Write, do complete projects for school or work. It was really tough. And then finally, actually, as I got older, I hit premenopause, and that was really the kind of that crossroads where things just started to kind of fall apart. I didn't have the energy to push through things, and just pure, had the because I struggle with anxiety too. And I think having anxiety would, kind of prompt me to kind of push through things that maybe I wouldn't have been able to otherwise in an interesting way. But really, what it was my therapist finally said, "Hey, I think you need to get an ADHD assessment," which, it took that long for someone to actually catch and recognize what was going on for me. And, there's a lot of reasons why women get diagnosed later in life. And I'll probably go into that more in a later video, but just thought I would mention that. But yeah, finally getting that ADHD diagnosis really was a relief. It helped me to see that it wasn't me. It wasn't that I was broken. It was that I needed to find strategies that worked for my brain. And so I started getting coaching from, started understanding there's ADHD specifically trained people who understand ADHD who provide coaching. And that was tremendously helpful just in helping me understand my brain and what was going on and how do I, process things a little differently? What do I need to do to work with my brain instead of against it so that I could be more successful? And then so I decided to become a coach. And then I found a coaching program that also focused on working with the subconscious and helping to overcome blocks and things that we don't necessarily even are aware of, in a really easy, gentle way. So being able to combine my understanding of ADHD and subconscious work has been really exciting and interesting. So I am really excited to be able to support people in that way. And it was a relief to get the diagnosis, but also there's a lot of grief. That was a lot of time I felt like I went through just barely getting by, and I could have gotten a lot better support. I could have gotten coaching a lot earlier, things that could have helped me. So it was there was grief around that. And that's really kind of what has sparked me to want to create this channel, because, I would love to be able to support people who are going through similar things to get through the other side, maybe a little easier than I had to go through. So that's kind of what brought me here today. And before, we go on, I do want to just mention that obviously, when we are talking about things like, past trauma or attachment issues, things can come up, or late diagnosis, the strong emotions can come up. And I really do encourage you to listen to yourself. And if you need to take a break from this video, please do, because we want to take care of ourselves when we're feeling like stuff is up for us. And so I encourage you to do that. And I also just wanted to clarify, there is a difference obviously between coaching and therapy. So coaching is really focused on helping you to better, like I said, have a thought partner who's going to be able to help you better understand your brain and help you strategize to work along with your brain instead of against it. And help you work on goals in your life that are going to be moving you forward. Whereas therapy, very important as well, but its focus is much more on helping you process through old grief, old trauma. If you're needing any kind of assessment around mental health issues or diagnosis or treatment around really overwhelming, strong emotions or things that might be related to mental health, you definitely want to seek a licensed mental health professional. And I'll put some links down below as well for anybody who might be feeling like they need that, because it's never it's never a weakness to find support and to work on your stuff. That's a sign of strength, and we don't have to do this stuff alone. In fact, it's really hard to do this stuff alone. So I just want to encourage people to get the support they need when they need it. So um, all right. So just to start, I'm going to be talking about masking, and I want to clarify what I mean by that because it is kind of a complicated concept in some ways. And I definitely don't, want to clarify. I do not mean that I think it's faking. I really feel like masking is about adapting. And when we mask, we're doing something deeply human. We're reading our environment, we're figuring out what's expected of us, how, adjusting to how we need to show up in order to feel safe and feel like we fit in. And fitting and belonging, it's really important to our well-being. We need to feel connection as human beings. And so masking isn't dishonesty. It's really an intelligent way we protect ourselves and we stay connected. And in some cases, I would consider masking sometimes to be a skill. Neurodivergent people, especially, can be very, very sensitive and often incredible at pattern recognition and sizing up a room. So developing a sharp ability to do that and read the signs in a room quickly, and then be able to kind of, you know, let's say, give a presentation at work, and adjust it quickly to land for a new client, let's just say, that is a way of adjusting. And, maybe you have to push down a little part of your personality that maybe doesn't, isn't as feel as comfortable in those kind of settings, but is able to do that in that moment to excel at work. So, I mean, it can be a skill. However, masking definitely can be very exhausting as well, especially when it's just kind of this automatic process that we've been kind of molding to from very early age. And often it is, when we do have to adapt early in age, these things kind of become part of our nervous system wiring. So, for those of us who had to, suppress or hide ourselves as a young age, before we had the language to understand what was happening, our nervous systems were repeatedly pushed into fight or flight and shut down sometimes, just to stay safe. And those adaptations often become wired into our body, and they can create shame around that parts of us that didn't feel like there was space for, that we had to shut down in order to fit into our environment. And like I mentioned, some families in situations, that it just wasn't safe to do so. There might be punishment or, reprimand for just being who we are. So it can carry shame, and that adds to that kind of exhaustion and not feeling good about oneself. So, for me, like as I was growing up, like I mentioned, there was a lot of, it just wasn't a safe environment often to speak up or express my emotions at home, and it could feel dangerous. So, while I do think I can think back and recognize there was a very outgoing kid inside of me, but I learned to fear, having the amount of energy that I had, and, speaking up. And so as time went on, in school as well, like, you're supposed to sit down in your spot and be quiet. And that was really hard. And so I was getting a lot of, kind of disciplinary action for not doing what I was supposed to be doing. And over time, as I got a little older, past, first, second grade and these things, I really started developing kind of a social anxiety. And my throat and my chest would get really tight, and it was really uncomfortable for me to speak in front of other people. My mind would go blank. I almost felt like I was leaving my body a lot of times. A real anxiety was starting to develop. So that kind of anxiety, and showing that especially in school age, you get picked on. That's kind of, you stand out. And so I, had to mask even that, masking to, masking as a younger kid in home to try to keep tamped, keep all these expressions and ways of being, kind of put the lid on it. And then, this anxiety was happening. And so I had to put the lid on that to not get, picked on in school. So I just became more of this very quiet kid, who was kind of the shy girl and just kind of tried to focus on being a good listener instead. Right. So here's another mask. And, um, that was a challenge to be a good listener, especially at that age where I am having to put the lid on my physical energy and wanting to go out and play and getting all my energy out. I think that energy really just ended up being pushed inside internally. And my thoughts just started to become just a whirlwind. And I was just always daydreaming, had a really hard time focusing. So here I'm trying to pretend in a way, not fake, but like trying to figure out how do I mask so that people feel like I'm listening, because that's I have to figure out some way to be an okay student and fit in with the other kids. And so I'm grappling to try to pick up cues and visual things so I can try to figure out what's going on in conversation and try to be a good listener. But my head is spinning. Lots of stuff is happening that I'm trying to kind of cover up and mask to seem like I'm paying attention and get through school. And so, there's a lot of these masks that were coming, trying to like push down a lot of stuff that was really going on underneath. So I just thought I would share that because I think it's a good example of how layered masking can be, and how it's not just a psychological issue. It's a physiological one too. These patterns that I was developing around anxiety, that was really my nervous system going into that kind of fight or flight mode, because I had learned that expressing myself could be dangerous in front of others. And that's sort of what can happen when we're trying to figure out how to just get through situations where we just don't necessarily feel like we belong, or that the situation's made for us. So if any of this is resonating for you, I want you to take a moment just to honor, those parts that work so hard, for you to get here, because if you're here, that's exploring this stuff, then that means you made it here and it matters. There's probably aspects of you that have worked really hard to, figure out how to navigate life in whatever way you had to get here. So I just want to honor that. I think we often criticize ourselves so quickly, we don't take time to really look at how hard we really are working. So um, the other thing is when we start to recognize that we have been wearing masks, some of us haven't even really recognized it, or maybe you had an inkling, but you're just slowly figuring this out for yourself. And it's really important to go slowly, because obviously these masks are here for a reason, and they're often covering up feelings that we had to push down. And so when we start looking under these masks and ways of being that don't feel like they were necessarily always authentic to us, there can be a lot of uncomfortable feelings that can come up, or numbness and stuff, that might surface. And so it is a process, and it's one that I think is important to go slow with, and recognize it. Putting an expectation on ourselves, to figure out who we really are. It's like adding another pressure, sort of similarly to when we had masks. So yeah, so be gentle with yourselves as you go through this process. Um, so I'm going to take a sip of my tea here. And I'd like to just transition back to the Fool card. And just taking a moment to reflect on this part of this kind of image here. And the reason why I like working with images is because they really do speak to a deeper level in our systems, more of a subconscious level. It kind of bypasses our critical minds, which so many of us are often so focused on, and helps us get more into our felt sense in our body, and often where our intuition lies. And that's usually part of ourselves that does feel pretty genuine when we can connect with that aspect of ourselves. So I do like using imagery for that reason. And, again, the Rider Waite tarot deck, it does have, it's kind of based on a Western idea of things. So there's going to be images in there that might not relate to all of us and things, but um, and there are a lot of different versions of the Rider Waite. I'm picking this one that's kind of more a traditional Rider Waite tarot deck, just for practicality reasons here. But we see a figure, and if you want to just take a moment, and you might want to, for some of you who like to write and journal, you might want to grab a piece of paper and pen just to kind of reflect on what comes up for you here. But let's just notice this is kind of, this fool here is representing this time in our lives before, things got complicated, when we were just able to kind of be free and ourselves and didn't have to take on roles and expectations. This character here has their arms kind of stretched out. They're holding a white rose. I don't know if you can see that in their hand. Head kind of tilted back. The sun is out, just looking up into the sky. And you might even, if it's comfortable for you to tap into your bodies. For some of us, it's not, and that's okay. But you might want to just imagine what it's like to just kind of take that position, that neck up and arms out, and just feel that in your body if that feels good to you. And notice just what comes up. Maybe just take a deep breath, just kind of connecting with yourself and noticing. Right. For me, I do feel initially when I look at this card, kind of a carefree feeling. And then as we look at this some more, we notice this person is also sort of standing on the ledge. They have this sweet little dog that looks very, we can look at that different ways. It looks very playful, but also maybe it's warning this person, you're about to walk off the ledge here. So for some of us, there might also come a feeling of discomfort. Like, for me, I can kind of resonate with that, like almost resistance to this carefreeness. Like, in times in my life where I wasn't being hyper vigilant and I was letting myself be more carefree, there were times when that didn't play out very well for me. There were negative consequences to not being really attentive to what was happening in my environment. And, there is kind of a fear sometimes when we let go like that we could potentially look foolish. Um, so just noticing, if there's any tension that comes up around that, that maybe there's some conflicting feelings with the freedom, the carefreeness, and then that constriction, right? I mean, obviously, we're all going to have different experiences of this. So when you think about that, we can kind of relate the purpose of this is kind of thinking about areas in our life where we might experience similar experiences. So if there might be a role or something that you have in your life currently, you might want to reflect on that role and just ask yourself, where in that role do I feel relaxed to be a little bit more like myself, or what feels more carefree or comfortable? And perhaps where in that role might I feel tension or tightness or, some restriction? So, without even having to worry about whether or not you want to try to change anything, just by noticing without judgment um, is really helpful, because it really is an invitation to as we notice with compassion and curiosity about what happens for us when we think about these things, we do start to become a little more conscious about the way we show up in our lives and have a better understanding so that we can accept those aspects of ourselves. So instead of judging ourselves for maybe putting on a mask, we can maybe just understand why that's helpful for us, and just be able to notice, right? And to build that sense of interconnection with ourselves. So I hope that that was helpful and interesting for you. Um, and I think that's enough for this, just for today. So just let that be there, that awareness. Um, and maybe that will kind of come up in your life, and you'll kind of reflect on that maybe the next time you are in a role or something, that you're kind of curious about how much of that is really feeling really genuine, and maybe what's not, as and something that feels a little less comfortable for you. So yeah, so I do love working with symbology. I think just for the fun of it, if you guys are game and you're still hanging out with me, I do love oracle cards as well. And I love just kind of tapping into our own intuition to get messages. I don't use, at least in this space, I don't use tarot or oracle decks so much for prediction purposes, but more just to speak to our inner psyches, our kind of our intuition, and help kind of give us some messages that we can kind of use as a mirror to better understand ourselves, and be curious. So I'm just going to draw 3 cards here and just see what we get. And you might even want to just consider how this might reflect on what we were just talking about. So um, the first card here I got was it's called Cleaning House. And I should mention, this is the Enchanted Map Oracle cards by Colette Baron Reed. So the first card we got was called Cleaning House. It's number 37. I think that's really interesting, because I think this kind of work a little bit is like cleaning house. It's like we're kind of getting an assessment of what's going on for us, and maybe sorting through some things, and getting clarity. So it's kind of interesting. There's a cat up in the window. I always think of cats as kind of our intuition. Cats are very intuitive. A view outside, cat sitting in the view outside, kind of taking a look out in your um, outside of maybe the world that we can sometimes feel a little closed up in, and seeking our intuition to help us with that. So that's cool. And then the next card, ooh, Magical Map Shifter 52. And there's a character here in the center with a lot of revolving images around them. We have a horse. It actually looks like a Pegasus. And some of them are small and I can't even tell. I think there's a little pyramid here, and a beetle of some sort. It looks like a scroll with a heart, and a globe here, just kind of revolving around. Um, so I think it's interesting. It's called Magical Map Shifter. So to me, like, the map is kind of the guide that we're kind of following to better understand our lives, and creating our own map, shifting our own map to work for us. But, take this how it fits for you. But yeah, that's cool. And then the last card is the Golden Palace. That's beautiful. Number 23. If that's for some people, numbers are really powerful. So that might have some meaning for you. There's a little crescent moon here and a golden palace with a lot of growth, like a lot of like an old tree here, like old knowledge. And I think of that as kind of that um, inner wisdom within us, and that golden palace, kind of like that treasure we find when we're seeking something deeper within us. But again, I think it's always great to know, if you want to share anything about what you pick up from these cards. We've got the Cleaning House and the Magical Map Shifter, and the Golden Palace. So yeah, if you're at all willing to share any of your thoughts about these cards or what came up for you, I'd love to hear. Just kind of fun way to reflect on ourselves, I think. So um, yeah, so um, Yeah, so I just wanted to thank you all for coming along on this journey with me. Thank you so much for being here today. I know we covered a lot of ground. So, please be gentle with yourself if anything came up for you during this video that feels a little intense. Like I said, please go slow, and it's deep territory and you don't have to figure it out all at once. So if you are curious, though, to learn more about ADHD coaching and the services that I offer, please visit my website at alizalifecoach.com, and I'll put that down in the description below as well. And if this video resonated with you and you're interested in exploring more about ADHD, trauma and attachment, and late diagnosis, please let me know by hitting the like button and subscribing. It really helps me to know, if this content is useful and if it's worth continuing to make. So um, and if you're, interested in or open to sharing a little bit about your experience, if your journey with ADHD or any topics that you'd be interested in hearing more about, please drop that in comments as well. I'd love to hear from you. My hope really is that this becomes a space that we can support each other as we explore what comes up. So if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much, truly, for showing up for yourself and exploring this kind of material. I know it's not always easy, and it means a lot that you're here. So until next time, please be kind to yourself. I'm sending you lots of love.